Anybody have any questions before we start?
I'm all good.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, me too.
I think we're about to be on the live stream.
I think I'm a bit kind of nervous because it's my first time, but yeah, I think I'll do okay.
No, you be great, man. You know, at least you came fully dressed for the occasion. That's what I like.
Exactly.
Right. Official countdown is on. We are officially streaming, people. Right. Okay, great. I want to thank you. I want to thank you all for joining us today. As far as the Orc Athletics aspect is concerned. So the name of this webinar is Stronger Together, as everybody already knows. Now, the whole purpose of this is that we are now starting an entire web series where we talk about the current social issues that we're all going through. And obviously, one of the main reasons being the George Floyd, which was really the trigger in all of this. And we felt that it was important to get the strong perspectives of people such as yourself, especially, you know, business and community leaders. This is the whole aspect of this. We want to get your, we want to create a proper, balanced discussion over these current issues. So obviously, just to really pick up on everything, it is obviously we will be mainly focusing on the Black Lives Matter perspective, issues within the Black community and what we can do moving forward as far as creating solutions. That's what we really want to do. So obviously, I really want to start off with saying, just to really break down the content, we're going to have the main talk itself. We're aiming for a whole 90 minutes max, given that there are 6 people here. Just a side note as well, Omar Khan will be coming in a little bit late. Again, I don't know, running a business is a little bit crazy. So, but he will join us eventually, hopefully around about 7:30, somewhere there. In between, around the 45-minute mark, we're going to have a quick 5-minute break, just get a little bit of refreshments and whatnot, you know, just keep ourselves refreshed. Then we're going to finish off with a 20 to 30-minute Q&A session from the audience in whole. So I really want to start off right now with giving everybody their panel space to introduce themselves one by one. So please, whoever wants to go first.
I'm happy to go first.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. Please go on. Please go on.
Hi, guys. My name is Naomi. I am the Managing Director of Onyx Support, which is a non-medical help provider for students with mental health conditions or physical health conditions. We've only been kind of practicing for about a year now, but things are they're going well. We're working all over the UK. So we work with a lot of diverse students and different ages. So yeah, that's about it from me.
Great. Who's next?
Is it okay if I go next?
Yeah, please go on, Larry.
Okay, so I am Larry Abanwa, and I'm an operating department practitioner. So I work in the operating theater. And I'm also an investor. So I invest in crypto and also in the stock markets. And I also have a resale business as well on the side. So that's pretty much me.
Great. Thank you. V?
I'll go next.
Okay, great. Please.
Go on. Yeah, sorry. Do you know, it's one of them ones. Hi, my name's Ebony Carr. I'm an 20, how old am I? 21 now. I'm actually a GB athlete and I'm currently studying at Loughborough University, just studying sports science. So I'm kind of a full-time athlete, part-time student. And yeah, that's it really.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, please go forward.
Yeah, so I'm Vimbai, and I'm a recent graduate. So I graduated in a master's in geography, and I'm also the first Black Miss London as well. So I was quite honoured to receive that title. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all about me. So in my thesis, I was writing a lot about the natural hair movement, which is a political movement. Kind of set about like with people with natural hair, because most of the time a lot of Black women would get fired, and Black men as well, based on their hairstyles. So I did kind of a bit of research on that, and I kind of look forward to talking a bit more about that, because that's also quite important, I believe anyway, to talk about in this issue.
Fantastic. And
Hi everyone, my name's Anthony. I'm also 21, so I'm a 21-year-old managing director of a company called White Sea Label Manufacturing. We specialise in the creation and manufacturing of sportswear and streetwear style fashionable products for brands. We specialise in wholesale. We also do bespoke work as well. The only bit of clout I suppose I've got is the fact that I was nominated as the highly commended Young Director of the Year for London and South in 2019. I'm just trying to top the GB athlete in the group as well. It's always a competition. So. But yeah, that's me.
All right, so I'm Miss Almaza. I just graduated from my master's in comparative literature. I run a spirituality and then also communicate, like building bridges between communities. It's something that I'm really passionate about, so that's pretty much me for now.
Fantastic, fantastic. No, thank you for everybody just doing your introductions. That's pretty dope. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to invite you all on this talk today, because everybody has such massive input and knowledge that they can really put together and just really inform the public in terms of what we're trying to do as a whole. So obviously, just to move on, the first question which I want to present to everyone, what we're going to do is I'll just pose a question, and again, in a similar fashion to what we've just done with the introductions, we can all do it one by one. So the first question is, how has racial and cultural discrimination affected your life and professional behavior? So please, anybody, move forward. All right. Okay. Yeah, Miss Sam, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So obviously I can see white passing. I am not white, however, but that has definitely impacted like my work environment. So for example, at my last work space, I was the only non-white woman there, and that meant that I was paid significantly less for doing the same work, but working more hours as well, and so on. It's definitely shaped my experience in the sense that people always make assumptions about you. My experiences kind of like change as I used to be a hijabi, so people perceive me from a different angle. Before it was, she's quite threatening. Now it's like, she's exotic. And it's that kind of narrative that people push onto you that doesn't give you any space to be who you are or present yourself for who you are. And then it also obviously impacts the amount of jobs that you get and how many people consider you for certain jobs and how people consider you not able, even though you have the capabilities, you have the degrees, you have the experiences, you are always kind of like pushed aside if, for example, your white counterparts are also applying for the job. So it's definitely like affected my experience both in the workplace and on a cultural level. People always come up with these really bizarre things to say to me, especially when I was a hijabi. It was always just, you know, very kind of like a lot of like terrorist jokes, a lot of inappropriate things that are like not what you deem like, for me, it's just like, that's wild that you think it's appropriate. You know, you thought about it and then you allowed it to come out your mouth in an environment and for it to represent you, and then kind of to assume that it represents me as well. So there's just a lot of things that varies depending on where you catch me in my life experience, really. But overall, it is the kind of thing of, you are still the oppressed Arab woman that I usually get, which undermines the fact that I've achieved so much in my life, you know. So I think everyone can agree that everyone's kind of like at some level or another had to kind of deal with a lot of like prejudice and a lot of discrimination based on the fact that they're not, you know, from a certain background. So yeah.
So, oh, sorry, Miss Sam, you cut out a little
That's
bit.
it for me.
I don't know on my side right there. Could you just repeat that last bit again, please?
Where did I cut off that? Sorry.
So it was the last few points where you were talking about what stereotypes really.
Okay. So as I was saying, it obviously, I think for majority of us, we have been discriminated against in some sort of way, and it's always this kind of assumption that someone wants to assume that your experience is entirely exactly what they kind of perceive through their own lenses, and so you kind of get stuck in kind of trying to be who you are without the space of being who you are and showcasing your capabilities and wanting to progress in life, but knowing that there are so many barriers in your way that continuously go on to undermine you, to work against you. And so that's my experience, and it differs obviously from where I am in my life and how people perceive me. So that's pretty much all I really wanted to say about it, really.
No, thank you. No, thank you very much. Ebony, I want to obviously pose the same question to you, but I really want to really take it from an athlete's perspective. What's it like in that world, and what difficulties have you come across?
So when it comes to the athletics side, there isn't that much difficulty in some respect, you know, because it's so diverse. So when it comes to athletics, it doesn't matter what color you are. If you're good, you're good. Like, it's as simple as that. You don't actually get seen, you know, like for the color of your skin. So obviously kind of, I've been doing athletics since I was 9 years old. So I've really been brought up with it. So I've never really had any negative kind of stereotypes or kind of discrimination in that type of way, because, you know, I was just naturally good. So it didn't matter for the color of my skin. It was actually more kind of like growing up, like during schools and works, you know, like I got discrimination, but in a positive way. So do you know how everyone has this like perception that, oh, if you're mixed race, you know, you're this, you're that, you're beautiful, all of this. So it kind of benefited me in a good way. So there was one time, for example, I was with a friend who was white, and we both walked into Costa just to get a drink before college, and then the women directly looked at me and said, oh, you're stunning, are you looking for a job? And obviously at that time I was. So it kind of worked out, like, so my friend was looking for a job also, but she directly, you know, looked at me, looked obviously at the color of my skin and said, oh, you're you know, you're beautiful, and then offered me a job. So it was kind of very different, because athletics is my main focus and I literally spend most of my time doing that. There has never ever been any type of discrimination at all, because, you know, it's all on performance, not what you look like. Whereas when it comes to like workplaces, like say if I was to kind of wear my hair down, you know, and it's naturally curly, you would get people kind of coming up, touching you, like, you know, like they've never seen curly hair before and stuff like that. And I wouldn't maybe call it discrimination, but it's just kind of a bit, it's just curly hair. Do you know what I mean? It's just, you know, it's just hair. So yeah, when it comes to the athletic side, I've never ever experienced like negative discrimination at all.
Okay, great. Larry, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I've got two different perspectives, and I'll give you a very good example. So in January, I was in Italy on holiday. So while I was there, like, if I was in public, right, and I would like just be walking, I would kind of notice that everybody would start to like tap their pockets and like move away from me. And so then I had to like ask a local, like, what's going on? Like, is this place racist? And then they said, yeah, that apparently they don't really like Africans that well over in Italy. So it kind of like made me feel sad, because I just went there on a holiday and I was told that I wasn't welcomed, really. So that whole thing kind of gave me PTSD to the point where if I was in Italy and like there was a family or a couple approaching me, I will be the one to cross to the other side of the road, just so they don't have to cross to the other side of the road. And then that would, like, you know, kind of make me feel bad. So and then when I came back to London for a few hours, I would like continue to do the same thing. So I would like cross to the other side of the road if anybody was like approaching me, until I had to just, you know, take a breather and realize that, look, it's not like Italy. This is London. This is England, where it's much more diverse. So yeah, racism from a Black male's perspective, it makes you be kind of on edge. So you're always kind of alert and looking for danger. And also it's made me to become more driven and motivated, because I want to be a better individual for myself and to also prove those racist people wrong. Because as I said, I work in the operating theater. So we do surgery and I do anesthetics. So there was a day when I was going to Lidl and I was dressed in all black just because I was going to get breakfast. And so then I saw a guy having a seizure outside. So I just quickly rushed. I put him in the recovery position and I then started to take my observations. And then two police officers then approached me. So one of them was an Asian male and the other was a British female. So I started to like tell them my findings. I was like, look, this guy is having a seizure, so we need to call the ambulance. He's got hypertension. And the white lady just stopped me and said, listen, can I have some ID, please? So basically, she was kind of questioning if I actually knew what I was doing or not. So I found that to be very offensive, because if I didn't know what I was doing, I wouldn't have put myself in that position to actually help that individual. So even though I'm dressed like this, I've got dreadlocks and I also have tattoos as well. So people may look at me as like a thug or someone who can rob you or something, where in actuality, I could actually save your life, you know? So I just think that people are just kind of biased due to the color of your skin. Like I said, I work in theater. So beneath my black skin and the skin of a white individual, we've both got the same color blood. It's red, the same bones and the same anatomy, the same liver. So it's just a very tiny variation, which is the skin and the hair. So why is it that those two variations would lead you to hate a fellow human being? So I just find that people who are racist are just very illogical. That's about it, really.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, V, please.
I guess like for me, it was more so growing up. So I kind of grew up in a primary school where it wasn't like, it was basically dominated with like non-Black people. So for me, there were not very much Black people, but the way that they were treated, especially Black men, was quite horrible. I even had my cousin, we all went to the same primary school, but he had to leave because of the way that they treated him, and he moved away. So there was always there were all these biased kind of perceptions, and these are young Black men growing up and not seeing themselves as any different, and they shouldn't feel like they are any different, but because they're treated differently, they feel like they might have to kind of be a certain way because they thought of in a certain way. So you can see all of that happening even during childhood. So as much as you don't really necessarily understand what's going on, you start realizing as you become more and more mature, just what happened and how it can affect the way that you do things and you think and things like that. When it comes to work, I think I agree with some of the things that you guys are saying in terms of you never really know if you didn't get a certain position because of the color of your skin, or you wouldn't necessarily know if how do I say this? Yeah, you wouldn't know if you didn't get a position, or if you didn't necessarily you know, whether it's the fact that you're qualified or you're not because you don't know what's going on. And I think a lot of things that happen in the workplace is that because of ignorance and things like that, that people will necessarily won't see that that people are being biased towards you because of the color of your skin. You think it's something else when it genuinely isn't. So I think those kinds of things need to change. Mm-hmm. And also, I totally understand what everyone was saying about hair in terms of businesses. So a study that was done by Dove, they found that about 1.5, like Black women are, 1.5 times more likely to get fired or to be sent home because of their hairstyle. And that's why it was so important for me to kind of do this study, because I think a lot of people underestimate that certain features about someone can really affect the way that they are, how they're perceived and how far they'll go in life as well, unfortunately. Especially thinking about workplaces, that affects your economic mobility. So if you literally cannot make a living, or you don't make as much of a living because you're being paid less because of the color of your skin or things like that, that's really going to kind of affect your whole livelihood. So I think it's really important that people start understanding their ignorance and understanding that there are factors that really do affect the way that you live out your life. Yeah.
No, for sure. I definitely agree. I mean, I think we've all seen maybe, especially there were a few cases in America where I saw some young Black kids that had to literally cut their hair in the middle of school because it didn't seem to be acceptable to others. So in these cases, it's absolutely egregious. So I guess it's just these little niggles that we really have to try and move past and try to alleviate that ignorance, as we've all spoken of today. No, but I really want to thank you all for your input. It was extremely invaluable. So obviously, that main question was really mainly steered towards the Bain panelists, unless if anybody else has anything else to input into this, into that first question. But now to move on to the second. This one is mainly just going to be steered, and we're going to talk about the George Floyd situation. Now, obviously, we all know that George Floyd, his death was recorded on video. Obviously, the atrocity of it all, he was choked to death for approximately 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It's hit a lot of people in the most direct way, white, Black, Asian, whoever. It's really hit everyone where it really hurts. So I really want to talk about right now, who were the first people that you spoke to in relation to George Floyd, and what was the context of those conversations? And if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. I think the first conversation I had with anybody about it was actually in a group chat with a few people that I went to school with. Now, in that chat, it's a diverse bunch of people. I think I'm one of maybe two of the white people in the chat, amongst quite a few other people from different diverse backgrounds. And it was the first thing I was talking about was how this can be happening in 2020. With it's midday, it's broad daylight. There's not just a bunch of people watching, witnessing, filming, but there's also a bunch of other colleagues who are all there in the moment and don't do anything to stop the situation or de-escalate the situation or do anything at all. there's loads of, speculation around whether or not one guy mentioned about turning him around, but not going to get too far into the specific details because regardless, that's still not enough. I was just, it was more shock. It was, when it first happened and when the video first aired and I saw it, that was my first thought. My first thought was, how can we be in 2020, midday, in the middle of the day in America, so-called the land of the free, as they say, this can happen. And a lot of the feedback around, in that group chat was a similar sort of thing. It was around, how can that happen in 2020? It was talking about, this isn't the first time, but this is just another one of those videos on Facebook that you see, or YouTube, or one of the videos that pop up of, a black man being discriminated and wrongfully abused by someone in power. And it doesn't always have to be police. But, it just so happens to be that the ones that are aired quite often are the ones to do with police.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the first communication I had with anybody around it. And as I said, my thought was really in relation to how this can still be happening, at this time in the middle of the day. If you were to flip it on its head and you were to say, it were to be a black man on top of a, black police officer, let's just say, well, I suppose not even police officer. If you were to just put it into a different context, it would be seen as, a really bad crime. It'd be seen as that. And I'm not saying that it hasn't been since, but it felt from me anyway, that at that time, this is going to be another one of those videos that's up. People are going to get angry at it. But just like the others, it's one of so many. And it's a shame that it happens. It shouldn't happen. But it's just another one of however many I've seen on Facebook, however many I've seen on YouTube. I'm glad it isn't that. I'm glad that people really have started kicking off about it. But that was my thought when it first all happened, when it happened.
No, for sure. No, thank you for your input on that. Omar, I see you've finally joined us. How are you? Can you hear us? I think it's probably frozen. All right. Okay. So can you hear us, Omar? Yeah. He'll probably join in a second. Hello?
Hello.
How's it going? You okay, Omar?
Hey, Chanda, I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for joining the chat. Obviously, we've already explained that you were going to be running a little bit late today. I'm
really sorry, everyone. Basically, I was opening a new new store on Monday here in West London, and with the corona thing, my shipments have all been delayed. My staffing issues, even now, my staff are still there. I'm going to drive my two managers back to East London shortly, so I do apologize.
No problem at all. So obviously, in the midst of it all, so we're currently going through the Q&A process between myself and the rest of the panelists. So obviously, in the moments where you're not talking, so we just ask if you can just mute yourself for the time being if you are being busy.
Sure, that's fine.
No, fantastic, mate, fantastic. I really appreciate it. So obviously, the second question, just to reiterate back, has been, who were the first people that you spoke to with regard to George Floyd? So that's the question which I've just posed to the panelists. And would you like to, what's your opinion on, well, not your opinion, who did you speak to in that process when it happened, when the death happened?
So when the George Floyd thing happened, I was actually coming in to London, I believe, at the time. And the first people I spoke to, obviously my immediate family, but initially after that were friends of mine who were very shocked. One of my friends, he lives in Kilburn, which is a very diverse area with all kinds of people, and we just couldn't believe the brutality and the inhumane nature of what happened to George. But it doesn't surprise me, and you might ask me why do I think that? It's not the first instance of this happening, not only to black people. I mean, we had in Iraq 6 years ago when ISIS did a massacre, actually, this Camp Spiker massacre. It's actually the anniversary, I believe, today, where 1,700 young boys who were training to become army cadets were literally killed on the spot. There was a river of blood, which is quite an extreme thing that happened. So it doesn't surprise me these kind of things happening in the world, and the result of very violent ideologies, whether that's Islamic extremism in the name of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or whether it's racist extremists in America, the Ku Klux Klan, and people who are sympathetic towards that. And the root causes is very much what we need to tackle.
Of course, extremely understandable. No, thank you for sharing that. Naomi, do you want to pose your answer there?
Yeah. So I also discussed this firstly in a group chat, and although some of the people in the group chat were quite shocked, it didn't come as a surprise. What did shock us though was how kind of when the police were getting recorded, how there wasn't like, it was kind of like it was embedded in the culture that this is okay, and that they was fine to be recorded. I know that they kind of shunned people away at first, but it was like this, like, we're invincible, and like regardless of who's recording, like we can still continue to do this. And so I think that was what shocked me the most.
Yeah, no, for sure. Larry, do you wanna?
Yeah, I was really just gonna touch on the whole police brutality part of it, and from what Naomi was saying, it feels like the police are shielded by their obviously by their big bosses, because if there was like a thing where, let's say, like doctors, if you harm any individual, you will get struck off. However, in the police force, all they do is just give you paid leave and then tell you to come back again. So I do feel like there needs to be a more kind of harsher punishment put on police officers, just like how doctors can be also struck off, because you are a civil servant, so you're meant to be serving the people, not just serving the people. So in terms of like this whole George Floyd thing, at the same time, I wouldn't say it's about black or white. It's mainly just about police brutality, because as Omar was saying, what happened in Iraq, we have also in Nigeria, America, all over the world. So it's just that the police think that they're very invincible. So if there's any way that they can be held accountable for their actions, I think they will think twice before they do harm to anybody else. And also I think with America, as I say, the land of the free, I do feel like they're very lost, very illogical individuals, because if you look back at history, America was actually populated by the Native Americans, if I'm not mistaken. And then it was then that they migrated and then killed everybody off and then said, yeah, this is my land. So really and truly, those individuals who are in America, who are always screaming, this is America, go back to your own country. If you go back to your history, you'll find that that's not your country. So you don't even have a place to actually speak in the first instance, which is why I'm going back to the point that in the future, or just moving forward, there's no point in you trying to interact or express your views to anyone who's racist, because they lack any sense of understanding and also a sense of empathy as well, because we're just human beings on this earth. So that's my take on it. So we need to find a way to hold the police force more accountable for their actions, because if you know that there is a repercussion for you, like, to do harm to anybody, think twice before actually doing it, because you would then lose your job. So the fact that they can just openly do it on camera, as Nami was saying, it tells you that they're being shielded. And so if they're actually being shielded, it does mean that there's a deep, like, rooted cancer in the police force, which can be racism, for example. So that's my take on it, really.
No, for sure. No, thank you.
Larry,
I really appreciate it.
Can I just touch on something, Jitendra, if you don't mind? He mentioned a really good point, and it's just some food for thought. America, the Native Americans, we look at what happened to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Canada, exactly the same. Australia, what happened to the Aboriginals? South Africa, what happened to the African people? Zimbabwe, you're from Zimbabwe, Canada, you know very well about what happened there. What happened in India to the people who are actually from the Indian subcontinent? There seems to be a trend here, and we can't generalize. We can't be a racist and generalize all white people are like this and all black people like that. There seems to be this colonial mindset that's been around for a long time, this expansionist ideology, and it's still there. Lo and behold, in society, in the police force, it's still there. It's there in the schooling system. It's there in the world of work, and it seems as though the establishment that exists in the Western world actually is passively promoting it. They're not actively promoting it, because openly they're going to say, yes, we want people's rights, whether you're straight, bisexual or gay, or whether you're white or black, whether you're Christian, Muslim, or somebody of no faith. But the reality is otherwise.
Yeah, no, completely true. Which is a subject which I will touch on a little bit later on, obviously in terms of the whole colonialism aspect and the whole tearing down of statues, which has been going on. Well, the petitions to do so. So yeah, obviously, especially with yourself, Ebony, who one of the first people you spoke to regarding this?
So, funnily enough, it was actually my coach.
Yes.
So, I'd actually watched I couldn't finish watching the video, because to me, I don't watching anything like that at all. Doesn't matter the colour of their skin. I just don't like seeing stuff like that. So yeah, the next day I had training with my coach, and I had the conversation with him, because obviously as an athlete, we get to travel a lot. And one of the options that we always have is to go to warm weather training in America. And I kind of just said, because he's white himself, and in the group, he's got black males, he's got me, mixed race, he's got, white athletes too. So I was just kind of how would you feel about taking us? Because now it's not just, going from A to B. It's, I'm going from A to B, but I also have, coloured athletes, I have males, and, would they ever be a target? And then he was like, and then I've got to think of myself, because of everything that's going on. I feel like, what some people do is they kind of base a small amount of people as a whole. Not every white person is racist at the end of the day. And sometimes I feel like coloured people may kind of have that perception, even though it's completely not true. So then himself, he was like, would I be a target if, we went there and I was just walking down the street? So yeah, the first proper intellectual conversation I had was with my coach, because it's, it's a big eye opener, because you do think, well, is it safe to go there? Seeing all this stuff. And yeah, it may have not have been based on race, but with everything that's happened in the past and the fact that it's consistent, it's not just a one-off thing, it's consistent, it does put a little bit of doubt in your mind. And obviously, I'm young, I'm only 21 years old, but the stuff that I've seen already, on social media, and I just think, what's it going to be like, when the younger generation grow up? It's kind of becoming a normality where it shouldn't be. You should not be judged on the color of your skin. But now, you're going to have people afraid to go to America. They could be white, black, Asian, you know what I mean? It's just that kind of fear of, well, would I actually be safe to walk the street there? So yeah, the first conversation I had was with my coach, and it was, just very informative, and it kind of puts a bit of doubt in your mind about just the future in general, really.
I completely agree. No, thank you for that input. Thank you. Miss Sam, who was the first person you spoke to?
I made it a point to check in on my friends, actually. So I messaged a few of my friends who are black themselves and just reached out and saw whether they're doing okay. It is a heavy thing, and it is a very targeted thing. There's no way of going about that. And so I just messaged them. Obviously, none of us are shocked, because we know that this happens all the time. And it was just, for me, it was more kind of just extending a hand and just being like, is there anything I can do? Is there anything that can help me and your mental health? Because this is a very heavy time for everyone, especially black people. And so for me, that was my kind of first step. The conversation kind of just was obviously about that, but then also about the fact the way we process and kind of are exposed to these deaths, and especially the deaths of black and brown people, and the way we have such a heavy culture of trauma porn. And this is, we seldom ever see the killing of a white person being distributed the way it does, you know, and you have to think about the way it dehumanizes people, especially Black and brown people, and especially Black people within this context. And so for me, it's just kind of wanting to circle back to that, and just, you know, we spoke about that and the way, you know, police brutality and how that is, you know, the police force is an inherently racist system, just because you know, a lot of our legal systems are set up in a way where it is racist. There's no way of pandering around that either. You know, it's not built to uplift people of color, especially not Black people. So again, there's no point of like ignoring that. So our conversations were pretty much more or less about that. So yeah.
No, thank you for your input. Larry, I know you just put your hand up. I'll quickly go over to V just for her last answer. Then I'll come back to both you, Larry and Omar, just to get your perspectives on it too. So yeah, V, quickly, well, not quickly. What is your answer? Okay. Who did you speak to?
Yeah, so for me, I spoke like with my friends and my partner as well. I think most of the conversations were kind of based on how the effectiveness of the protests that came after, just kind of, you know, it was kind of this, is it soft power, hard power, like how are the protests actually going to bring about, you know, the issues that have happened, because this has happened so many times. Even me, like I think the first time I hadn't really seen the video, but the first time like I was approached, I was like, I don't even think, I was like, oh wait, is it this one? Is it this one? There were so many that, you know, I feel like it has been normalized now. And I think it has been normalized in terms of media, but of course it's not normal like to people who are experiencing and to people who have seen all of this happening. But we also do understand that it is a systematic problem. And one of the things that we were talking about in terms of how effective the protests are is whether change really can happen, and if it's whether it's just a trend or whatever is going on. So I totally agree with what everyone else was saying in terms of it is a massive issue, and it is definitely systemic, and trying to get to the root of the problem is basically having to, you know, to really face what it is. And I think it has been overwhelming for a lot of people, but I feel like with this overwhelmingness that people are actually now understanding what has been going on. And if it's continuously going to be pushed and people are continuously going to be overwhelmed, they will at least understand, you know, some of the things that Black people have been going through this entire season. And yeah, so that's kind of what we've been talking about in terms of how effective it is and everything that's going on. You know, it is a pandemic, but it's also a racial pandemic that has been going on for such a long time. So it's about how the two kind of interconnect and the relationship between that and how that's actually going to be affecting the change.
No, thank you so much for that. Larry, you want to bring up your point?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what Ebony said in the fact that not all white people are racist, which is true. It's very true. I've got friends of like different diversity, creed and color, and also she was saying that not all white people are racist, and that's what Black people need to understand. However, it's very hard to know who's your friend and who's your enemy when you see that on the news it's like always a white individual oppressing a Black individual. And also in terms of like racism, it feels like the bulk of this whole racism is thrown at the Black community. Obviously, yeah, there is racism in the Asian, Chinese, Indian community, but the bulk aspect of it's thrown to the Black community by predominantly the white community. So it kind of leaves you as a Black male, as a Black female, as a Black individual to always second guess yourself and to always kind of like not open up to individuals because you don't really know who's got your back or not. For example, every single day before I wake up, my routine is wake up, eat, brush my teeth, and before I step out, I have to psychologically tell myself, okay, Larry, if you're going to work, you will face some sort of racism, but you know what, don't you worry about it, you're above that. Or if I'm going on holiday, just going to the street, I always kind of prep myself for what I'm about to face. And that can be seen as PTSD. If you're not Black, obviously you can kind of sympathize and empathize with us, but you don't really know what it feels like to be Black and go out, because like for Black people, I feel like we're very strong mentally, because if the roles were reversed and people like the white community would be in our skin and see how we're being treated, I don't feel like a lot of individuals could really withstand it. Because imagine seeing, as I think a lady touched on the fact that I think she said it's something porn, but I really got what she, yeah, exactly. Because how can you see a male and individual on the floor and there's another individual kneeling on his neck and the guy is just dead? Do you know what I mean? So it makes you kind of numb to the pain. So to some extent, I've become numb to racism, because like I've just kind of seen it all through my life, that now it's like part of me, which is wrong, because I don't want to have to bring up a child or a daughter and to tell them, listen, just because you're Black, you will have to face this and that. You're different from people. It's not good. Like I've got an 11-year-old brother, and he's fully aware of what's going on now in the world, and it just makes me sad, because like, as much as we want to say it, I don't think racism will ever die, because it stems from childhood and it's passed on from your parents. Because like, yeah, do you know what I mean? So I don't think it will ever really die. So all we just have to do is just educate ourselves and just spread awareness regarding it, because I feel like it just comes from a place of hate and not understanding that we are just a diverse bunch of people. However, we are just one people, and that is children of this earth. Because there are some white people who go to Africa on like a trip or something, and I'm pretty sure they've never seen where a Black person said, "Oh, get out of my country, what are you doing here, blah blah." Like they would be welcomed with so they will be welcome. Whereas if it was reversed, it wouldn't be that case. So why is that exactly? So I just feel like we just need to spread awareness about hate and to educate ourselves that we are all diverse. However, we are all the same.
No, I completely agree. Omar, did you have a point that you wanted to make quickly?
Yeah, just very briefly. Sam touched on it. The dehumanization of life. Why is it when a Black man is killed, or in this case, treated worse than an animal? Because at least you give an animal some water, you allow it to breathe if it's suffering. Why are these things ignored? Why is it when dozens of people on a daily basis at what point were dying from suicide bomb blasts in the Middle East, in Bahrain, in Syria, in Iraq, in North Africa? Why was that okay? It's like people were fine with that on a daily basis. Yeah, if we die in the UK or in America, it's bad. For example, 9/11. I'm not condoning any of these attacks, by the way. I'm just giving you an example, put you in perspective. But when an African man is killed, or an Arab male or a South Asian male, or dozens of them are killed in cold blood, the world doesn't blink an eyelid. I mean, there's a serious problem there, a superiority complex, we call it. Our people, people of color like myself, and youth tender, we have a problem. We suffer from inferiority complex. We want to aspire to be like the white man. I'm sorry to say that, that's a reality. We often change our principles or think badly of ourselves, our traditions, whether it's religious principles, cultural principles, even moral principles, when we see the Western world. The Western world has many good things, but this is one of the problems with the Western world, the superiority complex,
and this double standard when it comes to the lives of people of color.
Of course.
And if it's not clear for everybody else to see now, looking at the George Floyd example and what's been happening in the Middle East since the so-called war on terror started, I don't know when people will wake up.
I completely agree. No, that was an absolutely fantastic point that you brought up as well. So now, just to quickly touch onto the third question before we take a short break. What's the most useful advice and information that you've received so far regarding the Black Lives Matter movement, in addition to any other historic Black civil rights movements that you've seen before? And if you haven't received any sort of information, what would you actually like to know? And what I mean by that is, the people actually have a moral responsibility to educate themselves and the people within their own social communities. So yeah, I would like to pose that question on to Ms. Sam first. Please go forward.
So for me, I mean, we've had this conversation before where I've kind of stated that, within the age of information and technology, it's really hard to believe that people can't access information and educate themselves. It's not so much of whether you've received that information, it's more about, do you actually want to? Because everyone has a moral responsibility for themselves to go out there and find that information and learn learn and unlearn their own biases and so on. It's not so much whether I think there's been a scarce kind of like amount of information out there. There isn't. There is plenty of information out there. There is plenty of work done by people of color who are not coming from a white lens, who, I feel like everyone is required to do that reading, because there's no way for the community to grow or to change or to learn. There's no way for us to kind of dismantle racist, systematic racist systems if we're not going to educate ourselves. But that being said, I don't think it's, the responsibility of someone who's a person of color. And within the context of this, I don't think it's the responsibility of a Black person to sit here and educate someone who isn't Black on, Black issues. I don't think that is something that is fair. At the very basic level, it's not fair. We live in an age where a lot of people are still feigning ignorance when it comes to racism. They still kind of sit there and say, no, racism isn't, occurring. And when we do talk about race, we talk about it in the context of the US, because we're far more comfortable talking about it in terms of a place that's over the pond over there and not in our own back gardens. But Britain is a highly racist country, and we need to actually go out there and find that information for ourselves and learn about it. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it's also the case of, if we're going to continue to feign ignorance, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to continue to say, well, there is no issue. There's no point of me learning about this. There's no information out there for me. But as we've seen with social media, there's like a ton of information and sources that have come out to make people's life easier. But again, I think that is a moral and ethic kind of responsibility that you have for yourself, that you should be upholding. It shouldn't be anyone else's, responsibility. We shouldn't be sat here having to ask, Black people what they've gone through and what racism they've kind of faced, for us to turn around to also kind of pander around it and be like, oh, well, actually, it's not that bad. Or, oh, are you sure about that? That kind of conversation I don't find productive in any way. If anything, it just highlights the ignorance and the willingness to be ignorant. So that's my input on it.
No, thank you very much. Vimbai, do you have input for this question in terms of any information, and obviously in terms of that question?
Yeah, I think just kind of expanding on what you said, it's really true. There is a lot of access to information. Just to expand on that, I really think it's also important to think about intentions, because I honestly believe that there's so much access to information. It can be useful, but it can also be dangerous if used with the wrong intention. Like, for example, someone could come with the same information, but come with a completely different conclusion, with kind of facts that come about, and then they try to kind of project their own kind of views or perspectives of that information as well. So I think it's kind of important to know whether what you're trying to find out is out of a place of love and wanting to educate yourself, or if it's coming from a place where you kind of want to seem better or be more competitive or things like that, because that's kind of what we've seen in terms of colonization. They would kind of look at certain knowledge that maybe people would have in their colonies and use that against them. So I think it's also really important for us to have good intentions when we're trying to find certain information. And also kind of what I've learned anyway from movements in the past is, you know, like, for example, the Black Panther movement was quite a hard power, and, you know, they had different intentions. They wanted to have their rights and things like that. And then when I've learned about the natural hair movement, which was also shown in the Black Panther movement, it's a lot more soft power, but both had the effect that they wanted. So the natural hair movement, they managed to get a legislation in America called the Crown Act, where you cannot discriminate someone over their hair. And I think that's something that needs to be implemented in the UK as well. So I totally agree that it's not just something that's happening in America, it's happening here in the UK. The only difference, I believe anyway, is that America is fighting. I think that America is fighting a lot harder, you know, especially since the Black Panther movement. It's been so powerful there, and they've managed to change some sort of legislations and things like that. So I think it's also about knowing how and when to kind of use that power and how effective that's going to be as well. Yes, that's kind of my input.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for that. Extremely informative. I really appreciate it. Naomi, how about you?
Again, I mean, as a social worker and counsellor, I expected to receive a bit more information in terms of what the professional bodies, like such as HCPC and that, are doing.
Yeah.
But I haven't received anything yet. So more for me, it was, again, doing independent research on how I can support my staff. And I think kind of going back to what Larry was saying about how white people wouldn't be able to deal with it as much as Black people are a lot mentally stronger. And to kind of educate people on that, and kind of white fragility is also about, like, does anybody know about, like, the Jane Elliott experiments? And
yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's seen the one where like the white girl, she like ran off crying and everything as soon as something was put on her, and it was like, I can't deal with this. And like Jane Elliott was trying to say, well, actually for people of color, it's not that easy just to take off that and then walk out the room. So I think that kind of helps people understand how actually it impacts us differently, and how as a white person we wouldn't be able to deal with that constant racial discrimination.
No, thank you for that. And what was your take on it?
I think the most useful piece of advice I've received or information is around that it's not enough to not be racist, but to be actively anti-racist. And stand up against it, even if it's not you who's being discriminated against. And I think that we live in a culture, particularly touching point on where I've come from, where if something doesn't affect you, it's very easy to just, you know, pass it on. And I'm guilty of doing it. I'll be the first to admit that. I think everybody can to an extent, and say that, you know, well, it doesn't affect me, therefore, you know I'm not the one doing it. I know I'm not the one who's affected by it. Therefore, it's okay to just, you know, kind of stand back, and whatever will be, if that makes sense. And I think with everything that's going on, and I think, you know, I know a later comment or a later question in this will be regarding social media. But I think with social media, there's so much negativity based in it. But I think it, in some respects, has been positive in this light, because what it's done is educated a lot more people within the white community around the fact that you have to be openly anti-racist, and using social media as a platform is one of the strongest ways to do so, provided it's from, you know, it stems from actually caring, opposed to just conforming with what everybody else is doing.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you for that input, and thanks for your honesty as well regarding the whole factor of how people view it. Larry, you want to go on? Go next.
Yeah, I just want to touch on what Anthony said in the point that, like, if it's not happening to you, you won't really care about it. And I've got a very good example regarding that. So when Ebola happened, it happened in Africa. So even though there was coverage on it, there wasn't as much news or kind of panic as what we have during this coronavirus. And that's solely because of that. Ebola was over in Africa. It didn't spread to anywhere else. And when those two American doctors got Ebola, they was literally flown back to America, and in the space of 2 weeks, they were cured. Meanwhile, it took 3 years to bring out an Ebola vaccine. And then in comparison to coronavirus, where it's a worldwide issue, you can see the panic and the fear in literally everybody, because it's a silent enemy. So it is at your doorstep, you know what I'm saying, rather than at somewhere else, which is how I think individuals view racism, that oh, I'm not Black, so I shouldn't really care about it. However, you're an individual as well, so as an individual, you just have to be your brother's keeper. As I'm saying, there's no difference from me and a white man. It's just a superficial layer of my skin and probably my hair. That's the only difference. We're all the same. So just be your brother's keeper. That's all I can really say about it, because I can never in my life understand racism. I don't know where it's coming from at all, because I don't treat anybody that's different from my color any other way that I would treat any other person. I'm a guy who values mutual respect. So if you give me mutual respect, I'll give you mutual respect, whether your age, sex, or race.
No, thank you. Thank you. Omar, please go on. I see.
Yeah, Larry's touched on something absolutely fantastic. How we treat people regardless of race, color, religion. And 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, said in his farewell sermon that an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab. A Black has no superiority over a white, and a white doesn't have superiority over a Black. What distinguishes people is their piety, is how they treat others, their mannerisms, their ethics towards others. And I think if we apply this principle in our lives, clearly it's not there. We're in 2020 and we're still having this problem with racism in America of all places. So definitely we go back to those civil rights movement. We look at people like Malcolm X and we take inspiration from them. And this problem needs to be sorted out once and for all. But this is the principle, this is the way, the application of these type of ethics and morals that we need to make sure are properly implemented. And I believe we'll be in a better world if this was to happen.
No, of course. I think we all in this chat share that same sentiment in terms of how we all should treat one another. That is
Absolutely.
Definitely for sure. Thanks for that, by the way. So Ebony, please.
Yeah, so kind of, because I'm kind of, I'm mixed, so I've been around both. But obviously during school times, we never really learned about Black history. So, that was always, it's part of me. Being Black is part of me. So it's kind of like something that I've always wanted to know about. And then after this whole incident, I was speaking to my dad, and he was kind of, sat there deep in like all the racist stuff that he's been through. Because I feel like this whole George Floyd situation, like, it's just enough is enough. Do you know what I mean? It's like another Black person has died, like, from a white man, if it's about race. And he was just kind of sat there and he was just like, it's just enough is enough now. It's 2020. So he kind of told me, start reading up on your history, start reading about Black history, like, because that's part of you as well. So kind of get a really good understanding and, read books and just, find out your history. And I just feel like it should be taught in schools, because then maybe people will have a better perspective of it and what, Black people have been through. Because I feel like a lot of people are just kind of blindsided to it. They hear this stuff, but they don't actually know themselves unless it affects themselves. And it's like, the whole caring thing. And then my dad kind of, like, the advice he gave me was, never change who you are, because you are who you are, and that's the standard. And, treat people how you want to be treated. You've got a diverse group of friends. My partner's African Asian. I'm around different people all the time, especially with athletics. We just kind of said, never ever change who you are, but from now on, it will be the little comments, the little comments that some people who aren't coloured may think is just a joke. He was like, it's not a joke, because then deep rooted inside them is some sort of racism, which they would, which they've obviously been taught. So he said, with people like that, just be nice, but just cut them off. Don't keep them close, because they could, you don't really know who they are. So he just kind of said, just keep being you, do what you need to do, start learning about Black history, learning what happened all them years ago, because, in some countries it still happens today. Black people are still enslaved today. So he said, you just need to educate yourself a little bit more. And he also said, if schools actually started to educate children, it could, like someone made a comment earlier about racism probably won't end. No, it probably won't. But I think if more people had an understanding of it, there could be that sense of care and, kind of like standing up for those who are being discriminated because of the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm. No, of course. No, thank you for that, for your perspective. And I can definitely pick up on, obviously, both the aspect of education. Obviously, this is where it all really starts. Because obviously for myself, I can speak to say that my education of Black history was literally the movie Roots, if anybody has seen it. That's literally how I learned about Black history. The rest I just had to do myself. But no, thank you, all of you. But now I'm pretty conscious of time in terms of when this chat will end. So if anybody really does want to take some time out just to walk around or get a drink, but if not, we can pretty much push on. Yeah, if everybody's good.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. Thanks. So the fourth question, which I have for all of you, is what do you feel are appropriate actions that should be implemented in the UK that will help support the Black community? Now, what I mean by this are in particular to the protests, peaceful or otherwise. We've seen that in the media. They have somewhat demonized the Black community. I know Miss Amiyumi have spoken about this one before. So what I mean by this is that, let's say in the aspect of Black people being either called thugs or vandals. Now we've seen these words being said by people such as Priti Patel and even Boris Johnson, and obviously the redundant Donald Trump. So I really want to pose this question to you, and even just to pick up on Boris's tweets today, the Prime Minister's tweets, where he spoke about how by taking down the statues, petitioning to take down statues, in particular to the Churchill Monument, will, what was the word? It will quote unquote, okay, I can't remember the quote exactly, but basically he said it will take away the history and the education of what England is, of what Great Britain is. And I found that to be extremely hypocritical.
Yeah, big time.
Colonialism and whatnot, and basically taking away the African history too. So what's everybody's views on that? What do you feel are appropriate actions as far as this is concerned? So Vimbai, if you'd like to take the floor.
Okay. I think that, I mean, we've got stuff like, discrimination acts and things like that, and we see that they're clearly not being effective. And I think right now, like what everyone said, it's all to do with education, and it's probably not even enough just to kind of say, let's just educate what happened. I think it's also important for us to get education on what happened like before colonialism, because I think it's all about, there were gaps that were kind of formed because of colonization, because especially knowledge gaps, because there's some things that they have taken from so many different cultures, and they'd never really acknowledge that it came from them. And, all these kinds of things about certain cultures and appropriation, all these things are all coming and stemming from the fact that there's all these knowledge gaps. And it's great that there's all this, there's access to information, and it's important to talk about things that happened before colonization, during and after as well, like just talking about the present. And also, I think another thing to kind of bear in mind is that, people who are like governments or things like that, people of power who are calling people thugs and all these things, that they're actually all these words are coming from a place of privilege, because they've never had to go to the certain extent that people are to be heard. And I think that's so important for people to know that that's where it's coming from. It's not coming from people who, who have ever had to, protest in order to, you know, have their voices heard. These people are coming from a place of privilege. And I think that we need to do a lot more than just to have discrimination acts. I think it's really important that we enforce them. When I was doing my studies on movements, especially the movements that are happening now, is that it's very powerful to have social media. And a lot of movements, especially Black movements, I think when I was reading anyway on my thesis, is that Black people were very accustomed before social media was powerful in terms of talking to one another and having a conversation, which technically means that they have that kind of advantage to be able to kind of push forward some of the messages that they want to come across, especially on social media. So when I was kind of looking at the methods, I came up with like the 3 E's, which is obviously educate. The next is to empower. And empowering is kind of what we've seen now in terms of it's important to get businesses, important to get politicians and all these things on board to empower our culture and cultures of people of color, and embracing all of that. And the last thing obviously is emancipating it and making sure that all the laws are implemented, are put in place, and also not to just police kind of Black people in workplaces as well, because I've also seen that a lot of people are enforcing policies, or enforcing a lot of kind of rules more on Black people than they would do on their counterparts as well. So it's important that you have an equal distribution of laws, rules, and properly implement them.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate your view on that. Naomi, please go forward.
I just wanted to say, kind of going back to what Ebony was saying about education, how it has been kind of showed before that there are some elements of Black history in the UK curriculum. However, a lot of it is whitewashed. So like when they spoke about Rosa Parks, they suggested that she was like just really old and tired. They didn't actually explain like the truth. So yeah, I completely agree with like education, but making sure that it's the truth that is portrayed. Another thing I would say is that in terms of like workplace, how they've said that Black people have to do 80% more applications than a white person before they get a positive response. So looking at you know, on the application form where they have like the equal opportunities form, is that actually working, if that's still the case? So I think kind of looking in, businesses need to look at how the recruitment procedures go and making sure that there's diverse.
No, thank you. No, I completely agree with that. Thank you very much. No, Ant, please go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to jump on a bandwagon, but I think it does just come down to education. I think to touch point, or to kind of reiterate a point earlier made, is this stems from, you know, older people. This stems from parents teaching children, you know, wrong ways. And I think by ensuring that you're educating people in the correct way about, you know, it's not okay to do that. It's not okay to have these prejudices, and it's definitely not okay to discriminate against people. And it can be anything from, you know, it can be any form of discrimination, but obviously the topic here is racial discrimination. And, you know, I don't know where everybody else in this chat is from, but I'm in London. If you look at the statistics, London is one of the most culturally diverse cities in the world. And it's beyond me that I can live in such a city and still see it so prominently throughout, you know, just the general culture. So I think the education from a very young age and making sure that people are aware is number one. And then I think two is, you know, again, to touch point on what's previously been said, is, you know, ensuring there's regulations and laws in place that are you know, properly enforced, and maybe even make an example of some people. You know, I think touching point on the George Floyd thing, clearly the police officers in America that were involved in this particular you know, incident, you know, are somewhat being made an example of. You know, through the petitions, through the actions of everybody, both in America, over here, and all the other countries that have been actively protesting against this particular incident, amongst everything else, has led to, I believe, a conviction that probably wouldn't have come about, especially not as quickly as it has, if that weren't to have been the case. So I think education, you know, ensuring that there's the right laws in place, protect people and make sure it's done and make examples and just it's a culture shift. That's what needs to happen. It's a culture shift. It needs to be attacked at the root and work from there.
No, thank you. It is completely true. The culture shift is something that is extremely important, especially in this social climate that we do have. Miss Sam, what's your views on that question?
I think in terms of whether the protests work, they are, if we look back in history, they are the events that push for change. They are how we get different things passed through. And what they are there for is for us to change on a social and cultural level in terms of these structural powers. So I do feel like it comes down to the fact that, the aim of the Black Lives Matter movement, it was sparked by George Floyd's death, obviously, but a lot of people have the sentiment that it's moved beyond that, in the sense that people want all these systems to be abolished because they are systematically racist. And without abolishing something and rebuilding a different system that is there, we're not going to move away from a society that is inherently racist. In terms of the removal of statues, I had a look at Boris Johnson's tweet, and it's to me, it's quite performative. People don't, it's great that we don't have to look at slave owners anymore in terms of it being a statue, but what people really want is better livelihoods. They want equal opportunities. They want economic a safety net, economic wise, social wise, academic wise, and it isn't just about, I think, educating ourselves as much as it is about also proactive activities and rallying behind people who are doing the work and making sure that we are supporting. There are different ways for us to do that, and I think it really comes down to just education. Like, education is a great starting point, but if we all know about this and do nothing about it, then what? Mm-hmm. What are we really changing here? And I think it kind of just touches back on the fact that even our academic lives, the British education system, touching on Naomi's point and so on, it is inherently very much whitewashed. We do not have a curriculum that is anything other than coming from a white lens and is the white perspective. If we did, then we'd know Winston Churchill isn't someone that is great or someone to look up to. We'd know that these are slave owners and we'd know what they are and their atrocities are, but we don't have that education in place because the education system was firstly built to disenfranchise people, to make sure there's still a gap between people. People who are from a higher economic background inevitably will have a better education than those who are from a lower background. And without having to be said, people who are people of color do tend to have that disadvantage. So for me, it's about being active about the education as much as it is about the education, being active about the fact that we need to change these structures. There's systems that are in place and there's systems that are very much white systems. They are set in that. There's no point of being kind of dilly-dallying around it, really, because me saying that it's set in whiteness isn't me saying that all white people are bad and we should get rid of all white people, but it's about recognizing that being white within these systems will give you privileges. And so even using your voice as a white person means that you're doing the bits that we can't have that power to change. So that's my input for it.
No, perfect. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Larry?
Yeah, I've got a few points actually, and the first one is that I think, as everyone's been saying, we just need to spread awareness and educate ourselves. So, for example, Britain is a country where we drink tea a lot. Do you know what I mean? So it's like a staple here. Even at work, literally, it's just tea. But did you know that 70% of the tea imported into Britain is actually from Kenya in Africa? So I think if we are to educate ourselves and bring and shed light to the amount of resources that Africa is given to the world, maybe that would kind of bring about a change where Africa and African individuals can be more appreciated. Because even in the NHS, there's a lot of minorities who are actually laying down their lives for individuals. So I just feel like Africa needs to have a better light shed upon it. And also there was a point, I forgot the name of the individual, but I feel like Black history needs to be taught in a different way in the educational system. Because as I said, racism starts from birth. So like people learn how to be racist. So for example, in psychology, there's a thing where they say that nature versus nurture. So it's like when you're a child, you kind of learn a lot of things that would make you into a certain type of adult. So for example, if like in year 1, year 2, children are taught on diversity and how even though we are all different in color, we are all the same. Maybe if they would go back home to their parents and their parents would say, oh yeah, look at this foreigner, blah, blah, or look at Africa. Maybe they would say, no, daddy, no, mommy. I was taught that Africa has minerals, Africa has this, has that, and there's no difference between me and a Black person. We're all the same, dad. We have the same organs, bones, and everything. So you're actually wrong. So I think the first step needs to be education, because if you educate yourself, you can bring about a change to yourself. For example, for me, I was a very bold kid when I was growing up. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was educated, but I didn't really care. However, I just got to a point in my life where I was saying, well, I don't think I'm moving forward. So maybe I need to actually educate myself and see how I can bring about a change in myself. So I think education is the biggest step, and also spreading awareness. So for example, as I said, I've got dreadlocks, right? And so in theater, we wear an operating hats just so we don't spread any infections. However, majority of the hats are very small, and so I've got like a lot of trouble just fitting all my hair. And so I think that stems from a place where the manufacturers or something are just generalizing everybody that, oh, everyone has hair that could be just fit into a hat. So maybe, education in that aspect as well. And also I feel like Africans have always been looked down upon in history. For example, I don't know if it's called the Francis Report, I may be wrong, but when segregation was abolished, there was a research that says that you're 10 times more likely to have a deformed child if you have one with a Black person. So things like that will bring fear into the hearts of individuals and make you not want to mix with those, individuals because of what the people in power are telling you. As we know, there's a lot of people, forgive me for saying this, who are sheeps, who just listen to the media and take what the media says. And so also it says that if you're Black, you're 4 times more likely to have prostate cancer. And I think that's just BS, because I work in a cancer hospital and I do robotic assisted prostatectomies. So in my 3 years of doing these surgeries, I've only ever seen 2 Black patients, and the rest were from other races. So how is it that Black people are 4 times more likely? Even with this whole coronavirus as well, they were saying Black people are 4 times more likely to catch it. Maybe it comes from a place where it's because of their poor background or poor exposure to medical care. But from my own perspective, I think that's a way of kind of telling other races that, listen, if you're not Black, you're 4 times likely not to get it. So you can, be safe and return back to work and boost the whole economy. Because as we know, Africans maybe do jobs that aren't really that better than their counterparts. So it would make those feel that fine, I'm more likely not to get it, so I can go back to work. So I just feel like the whole government, they're not out for anybody's best interest but themselves. So I think the change needs to start from the top. So it needs to start from the government, which is going to be very, very, very hard. So whichever way that can be done, I think it would be beneficial for everybody, really.
No, thank you very much for that point. I am very much conscious of time, so I know we got up until around about 8:35. So just before obviously we go on to Ebony, I'm gonna obviously skip on to the last question, which is the main question which I really want to ask everyone, and something which I feel is going to be most beneficial just to round things off. So obviously, Ebony, what is your opinion in terms of appropriate actions to be implemented in the UK?
Do you know what, right? This sounds so crazy, yeah? And people might laugh, right? But you see how, like, I feel like when you are racist, you know, you should get charged. But do you know what? Stop these people from going on holiday or ordering Indian or Chinese. Do you know what I mean? You can't go and enjoy people's culture, but then discriminate them.
Yeah.
Honest to God, right? And I say it all the time. It's like, do you know those racist people, right? Who, you know, discriminate you because you're darker, but then we'll go to Spain or go to the Caribbean, or do you know what I mean, go somewhere hot and get a tan and become darker. How does that make sense? It doesn't. And I know it does sound ridiculous, yeah, but that's what I think should happen. And also, you know, do you know, like how I know a lot of like food products do come from all over the world? Stop it for a week or two, because people will get sick and tired of eating unseasoned chicken and smiley faces and beans. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know, it's just one of them ones, you know, like you've got to, I think doing stuff like that, then people would actually start realizing. But do you know what? I think people just really do need to wake up and open their eyes. At the end of the day, we're all human, we're all different. Some of us are darker, some of us are lighter, but actually having like serious, like, you know, punishments for discriminating someone over something that they can't help, I think, you know, could do the world a bit of good.
No, thank you for that point. I really appreciate it, Ebony. Thank you. So just to move on to the last question, we've got 10 minutes left. So just to pose on to everybody. Now, what are programs and or strategies that you feel that businesses should implement in order to help and support Black people from discrimination and microaggressions? Now, these microaggressions can be such things as, oh, I love your hair, can I feel it? Just as you said before, Ebony, or I can definitely tell you of one, why I call it definitely an extra microaggression. I got this at school. Now, this, we were in French class, and my classmate now asked me to stick your tongue out. Let me just disclaimer, I was, I think maybe about 14 years old, 13, 14, somewhere around there. She said, stick your tongue out. So I did. Her response was literally, oh my gosh, it's the same color as ours. Now, obviously as a young kid, I was a bit taken aback. But these are the sorts of things that I have come across quite often in my life. So obviously, and these kinds of things can also happen in the workplace. So what do you feel, guys, are programs and strategies that can actually be put in place? So I'd like to put Naomi at the forefront of that, please.
Okay. I think that one of the main things to kind of make people aware of in the policies is when it comes to like whistleblowing policies, to make sure that that includes any like racial discrimination. So making sure that there's always a safe place for any Black employees or kind of clients to come to you and address their concerns of like what's happening in the workplace. Again, go back to like recruitment and making sure that people like speak out if they witness other people being racist or just culturally discriminating. So just making sure that there's like a whistleblowing policy there.
No, thank you very much. Ant?
I think that, and I think that's from a back end perspective, which is a great, obviously that's where it should start. But I also think that at the same time, businesses should start from the front end promoting that. So I mean, a great example, and obviously it's very relevant to what I do, is what Gymshark are doing, If you look at the culture that Gymshark have adopted as a company, as a whole, and what they're doing in relation to this, it's great to see, because they're a company that have a huge following. You know, and whatever way you look at it, they have a voice as a brand. They have people who follow that brand and will, in most instances, do a lot for that brand. So I think from a back end perspective, sure, you need to have these policies in place. You need to have this, HR all tied up and everything in that respect. I think from a front end perspective, they also need to do their part in promoting it and getting actively involved. And I don't think businesses should feel like, oh, you know, we have to put on this professional front, or, you know, we're in this sector, therefore, is it something we should comment on? Yeah, I think you should. You know, I run a fashion manufacturing business, and I commented on it because at first I thought, is it my place to comment? It absolutely is. I think everybody should collectively. And that, you know, whether you're a small business, whether you're a huge, insanely massive business, all of it makes a difference. So I think both back end and front end needs to change.
No, thank you for that. Vimbai, what's your input on that, please?
Yeah, no, I totally agree that everything in the back end and the front end needs to kind of show that they are in solidarity with other people. And it is also important that we also talk about how Black people are being exploited in businesses as well. Like especially in, like, for example, the modeling industry, where a lot of people are using Black models just to kind of say, yeah, we're diverse and whatnot, but they just use them and then kind of drop it. So I think it's very important to cater as well to people, you know, that you're kind of with or hiring. And it's also important as well to cater to the differences that we have, because there's no doubt that we are different. And especially looking at the hair perspective, like what you've just mentioned before, you know, you should cater to having, you know, kind of equipment and things like that cater to certain differences, that we don't feel left out, so that we're not reminded that we are completely different, and everything is just kind of equal. Like, for example, in the law of court as well, like in courts, you still have these kind of blonde hair that you just see like Black people wearing, and you're like, no, but our hair's not like that, and things like that. And I think it is also important to understand as well that, you know, diversity and differences are something to be celebrated and embraced in the workplace. And also, I think this is also important. I mean, it's also important to look at Black businesses as well and to promote Black businesses, because I think a lot of people kind of don't think that we have certain services to kind of give to others as well. So I think it's important to promote our services and you know, kind of do our best with that.
No, thank you so much, Fee. Thank you. Ms. Sam, what is your input on that, please?
I think we need to approach it from a completely different perspective, where people don't think of people of color as an afterthought, in the sense that, you know, people set up their businesses and they, you know, have all their employees who tend to be very much white people at all times. And then they think about, oh, okay, hold on, I need to get me one, you know, POC in there as well, just in case someone screams, oh, well, you're not a racist company. I feel like people forget that, you know, diversity isn't synonymous with justice, sorry. And it's something that Angela Davis spoke about as well, where it's like people, you know, there is no justice in including POCs in a system that is working against them, you know. And the way for you to dismantle that is to have workshops, to have different, it all goes back down to education and, you know, the way our society is set up. If we're going to have, you know, a society that recognizes what racism is for itself, then we need to put up, you know, we need to have these diversity campaigns, these, you know, workshops and stuff like that, where it's mandatory for people to actually take it. You know, because a lot of people don't recognize that what they're doing are microaggressions or macroaggressions. You know, they just see it as that's completely normal. You know, for me to go up to a Black person and touch their hair, that's completely normal to them. You know, or to kind of make small comments here, there, and the other, which, you know, in the long run really affects someone's self-esteem. you know, in the long run, it really affects your work ethic. It really does affect your mental health. But a lot of people don't recognize that. A lot of people think that this is okay. And just because I made a joke, you know, you're too sensitive. It's not about being too sensitive. This is my livelihood. This is my personhood. You need to be able to recognize that and respect that. But when you have a company that doesn't respect you as a person or doesn't see you as a person, you're not going to get a company that works towards a different aim. You know, it's not going to be a company that advocates for unlearning all these harmful systematic issues that we have, like, you know, with racism, as we're talking about it now. You know, for me, it's more about, you need to be able to make it mandatory for everyone that enjoys your company to go through these workshops, to recognize that their behavior is wrong and someone else's behavior is also wrong. You know, you need to implement these ways so people, you know, like for me personally, I had a white colleague who joined much later, but felt very comfortable in trying to get me fired over something that's got nothing to do with me, you know. But at the same time, I was the only non-white person there. With the exception of one person who was also mixed race. So it's that kind of thing where people need to build from, you know, because racism, it works from top down. It's not from the bottom up. So people need to kind of work where, you know, people around the boards, in board meetings and so on, it needs to be a place that doesn't only have a white perspective. It needs to have a place that a lot of people can go there to educate themselves, but also feel comfortable educating other people. You know, if you don't have that, then we're not going to grow in any sort of way.
No, thank you so much. No, that is extremely important to know. However, unfortunately, we've only got sort of 40 seconds left. Well, a little bit under that. But I'm so sorry to both you, Larry and Ebony. But guys, thank you so much for being part of this webinar. It's been extremely informative. Informative. The other one wasn't a word. But guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your time. And have a fantastic day. As for the Q&A section, guys, we will, everyone please post in your questions into us, and we will find a way to still get those questions answered to everybody else. But I appreciate your time to everybody, and have a wonderful night. And again, thank you all. Appreciate you all.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Hey guys.
Bye.
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 Bye.